Ever stared at some modern gadget and thought, who on earth signed off on this? Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because today we're excavating 33 historical inventions so spectacularly misguided, so brilliantly bizarre, they make your weird uncle's garage projects look like strokes of genius. Forget sensible progress. We're diving headfirst into a parade of pure, unadulterated, why did this exist? Get ready for some serious laughs and a few genuine jaw drops. 1. Kicking off our parade of historical, what were they thinking? Moments. Let's shimmy our way into the era of the vibrating belt machine. Picture this. You, strapped into a hefty contraption with a thick canvas belt wrapped around your wobbliest bits. Then, flick a switch, and the machine proceeds to jiggle, shake, and pummel you with relentless vibrations. The promise? Melt away fat. Tone those muscles. Banish cellulite. All while you just stood there, looking like you were auditioning for a paint mixing machine. These things were everywhere. Gyms, salons, even home catalogs. People genuinely believed they could be violently vibrated into shape. It was less a fitness revolution and more an invitation to have your internal organs rearranged by a piece of overzealous machinery. The only thing it reliably burned was electricity and maybe your dignity. 2. You know what movies were really missing back in the day? A good solid whiff of, well, anything the director fancied. Enter Smell-O-Vision and its equally fragrant competitor, AromaRama, from the ambitious 1950s and 60s. The concept was pure olfactory optimism. Pump specially created scents into the cinema at key moments to truly immerse the audience. A field of flowers on screen, you get a floral bouquet. A pie baking, the sweet smell of cinnamon. The problem? Technology, as it often does, had other plans. Scents would linger, mix into an unholy potpourri, or arrive comically late, making audiences sniff for roses while watching a car crash. Imagine the smell of Battlefield mingling with First Kiss. It was less an enhancement and more an assault on the nostrils, proving some cinematic experiences are best left to just sight and sound. The whole thing just plain stank. 3. Now, for an invention that will make your jaw drop, then make you want to hug your kids extra tight and thank modern safety standards. From the wonderfully wacky 1930s, I give you baby cages. Yes, you heard that correctly. We're talking literal wire cages designed to be bolted to the outside of apartment windows, so infants could get their daily dose of fresh city air while dangling several stories above the unforgiving concrete. Because apparently, a gentle breeze mixed with exhaust fumes and the distant threat of gravity was peak parenting. Marketed to space-starved urbanites, these contraptions look like something you'd use to air out a particularly troublesome pet, not a human baby. One shudders to think what a sudden gust of wind or an overly curious pigeon could have led to. Thankfully, this high-altitude, high-anxiety parenting hack eventually went extinct. 4. Got a deadline breathing down your neck? Finding it hard to concentrate with all those distractions? Well, forget your noise-canceling headphones because back in 1925, Hugo Gernsback, the father of science fiction, unleashed the Isolator Helmet. This wasn't some sleek, futuristic visor. Oh no, this was a colossal, terrifying metal helmet, possibly forged in the fires of Mount Doom, that completely encased your head. It promised total sensory deprivation with thick soundproofing and vision restricted to 2 tiny eye slits aimed directly at your work. It even came with its own oxygen supply because, apparently, the sheer intensity of focus might make you forget basic bodily functions like breathing. You'd look less like a productive worker and more like a B-movie villain preparing for world domination, or perhaps just a very confused welder. Unsurprisingly, the main thing it isolated people from was their dignity. 5. Ever fantasized about your own personal flying gizmo, soaring majestically above the plebs stuck in traffic? The 1950s tried to deliver with the Hiller VZ-1 Pawnee, or as it's more delightfully known, the flying platform. Imagine this. You, standing heroically atop what is essentially a giant, unshielded fan pointing at the ground. Control. Achieved by bravely leaning your body in the desired direction. like trying to steer a bucking bronco that's also a leaf blower. Developed for the military, the idea was a soldier could just hop on and gracefully float over obstacles. Graceful was not in its vocabulary. Pilots looked like they were engaged in a life-or-death interpretive dance routine just to avoid becoming a rapidly descending lawn dart. It sounded like a swarm of angry metallic bees gargling gravel, and probably gave anyone unfortunate enough to be underneath it a surprise haircut and a sudden urge to pray. The military eventually decided that 2 feet on solid ground wasn't such a bad option after all. 6. You'd think a certified genius like Thomas Edison, the man who practically invented the modern world, would have the Midas touch, right? Well, hold on to your concrete hats, because not every idea was a light bulb moment. In the early 1900s, Edison became obsessed with the idea of concrete. Not just for buildings, but for everything. He envisioned entire houses poured from a single mold, complete with concrete furniture. Yes, you could have a stylish concrete bathtub, a charming concrete staircase, and even a delightful concrete piano to entertain your guests, assuming they didn't mind the risk of permanent butt-cheek indentations from your concrete sofa. The dream was cheap, durable housing. The reality? The molds were astronomically expensive, the houses were damp, cold, and about as customizable as a brick. Stubbing your toe on a concrete bedpost was probably a daily, soul-crushing event. It was a heavy idea that, thankfully, didn't set. 7. All right, gather round, gentlemen, for a tale of grooming gone horribly, hilariously sideways from the late 19th century. Forget your fancy 5-blade razors and soothing aftershaves. Prepare yourselves for the group shaving machine. Because why shave alone when you can participate in a synchronized, potentially lethal, facial hair removal ritual with 11 of your closest acquaintances? The contraption allegedly involved men sitting in a circle, chins resting on designated supports, while a central mechanism powered a series of blades or abrasive brushes. One sneeze, one hiccup, one slightly off-kilter mechanism, and you're looking at a scene from a low-budget horror film. Beyond the glaring hygiene concerns, sharing blades, anyone? The sheer potential for catastrophic error makes this one of history's most terrifyingly dumb inventions. Thank goodness for personal safety and individual razors. 8. And now, from the brilliant minds of France circa 1932, an invention that bravely asked, why be good at one thing on land when you can be spectacularly awkward at 2 things, both on land and water? Mesdames et messieurs, I present the Cyclomer. This was an amphibious bicycle, a marvel of misplaced ambition. On solid ground, it was a bike, but attach its 2 enormous hollow drum-like wheels, which doubled as floats, and suddenly, you were ready to pedal your way across the local duck pond. In theory, anyway. Reports suggest it was like trying to ride a particularly stubborn hippo on land, thanks to the cumbersome floats. And in the water? It moved with the blistering speed of a snail recovering from a heavy lunch, steered by a separate, equally clunky rudder. It was the ultimate transportational paradox, designed for versatility, but excelling only at being hilariously impractical in every conceivable environment. 9. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, and prepare to be amazed by a marvel of 18th-century engineering that baffled kings, queens, and even Napoleon Bonaparte himself. I speak of the Mechanical Turk, a life-sized mannequin of a Turk in Ottoman robes, seated at a cabinet, ready to play chess and win. This wasn't some clumsy automaton. The Turk played with skill, strategy, and a flair for the dramatic. It toured Europe and America for decades, a sensation of its time. How did it work? Magic? Early AI? Nope. The big secret, revealed much later, was that a human chess master was cleverly hidden inside the cramped, cleverly designed cabinet, pulling levers and making the moves. It was less a technological marvel and more the world's most elaborate and long-running prank. Imagine the poor guy sweating it out in there, probably cursing every bishop and pawn, all for the sake of a grand illusion. The greatest chess-playing robot was, in fact, just a very dedicated, very cramped human. 10. You're a sophisticated smoker in, say, the early 20th century. You enjoy a good cigarette. But what happens when it rains? Disaster. Your precious smoke gets soggy, your street cred plummets. What's a dapper individual to do? Fear not, for some genius, whose name is sadly lost to the mists of ridiculous history, invented the cigarette holder umbrella. This wasn't an umbrella for you, oh no. This was a tiny miniature umbrella that attached directly to your cigarette holder, shielding only the lit cigarette from the cruel, wet elements. Picture it. A grown adult diligently protecting a single cigarette with a comically undersized brolly, while the rest of them get soaked. It's a level of dedication to one's vices that is almost admirable if it weren't so utterly preposterous. The sheer visual of this thing in action is enough to make you chuckle. Priorities, people, priorities. 11. Flash forward to the groovy 1970s, an era of big hair and even bigger fashion faux pas. You've spent hours teasing, spraying, and perfecting your magnificent bouffant or feathered Farrah Fawcett hairdo. Now it's shower time. The horror. How do you protect your meticulously crafted coiffure from the ravages of water and steam? Enter the shower hood. This wasn't some chic little cap. This was a full-on, heavy-duty plastic bag that enveloped your entire head, cinching around your neck, making you look like you were either preparing for a hazardous waste cleanup or about to be launched into space from your bathtub. Practical? Maybe, if you didn't mind the claustrophobia and the high chance of emerging looking like a steamed vegetable. Fashionable? Absolutely not. It was the kind of invention that screamed, "My hair is more important than my ability to breathe freely or see where I'm going." 12. Driving in the early 20th century was a bit hazardous. Cars were new, brakes were questionable, and pedestrians, well, they had a habit of getting in the way. So, what was the compassionate, safety-conscious solution? The Pedestrian Catcher, of course. Attached to the front of automobiles, these devices were essentially giant scoop-like contraptions, sometimes resembling a grotesque cowcatcher from a locomotive, designed to gently sweep up any unfortunate soul who wandered into the vehicle's path. Imagine being gently scooped up by a moving metal shovel. The ads probably read, "Reduces pedestrian fatalities by turning them into unwilling hood ornaments." It's a testament to the era's rather brutal approach to problem solving. Thankfully, the focus eventually shifted to, better brakes and teaching people not to play chicken with a Ford Model T. 13. Before electric toothbrushes, before even reliably bristled manual ones, dental hygiene was a wild west of strange ideas. Enter the tooth polisher, a rather alarming Victorian-era device that often consisted of a handle with a rotating head, sometimes made of leather, felt, or even ivory, to which you'd apply a tooth powder. Some were manual, requiring vigorous hand cranking or rubbing, while others even had clockwork mechanisms. Imagine winding up your toothbrush like a toy soldier before battle with plaque. The effectiveness was debatable, and the potential for gum abrasion was probably quite high. It was a far cry from today's gentle vibrations, more like taking a power tool to your pearly whites. You'd certainly feel like you'd done something to your teeth, though whether it was good is another question entirely. 14. Hollywood, 1930s. The golden age of glamour, where perfection wasn't just desired, it was meticulously engineered. And how did they achieve this? With the beauty micrometer, of course. Invented by the legendary Max Factor himself, this terrifying medieval-looking metal cage was strapped onto an actress's head. It featured a complex array of flexible metal strips and screws that could be adjusted to measure every contour, every curve, every supposed flaw of her face down to fractions of an inch. The goal? To identify areas that needed correcting with makeup to achieve the mathematically perfect face. It looked less like a beauty tool and more like a device designed to extract confessions or recalibrate your skull. Imagine the pressure, sitting there while someone literally quantifies your imperfections. It's a stark, slightly horrifying reminder of how bizarre the pursuit of beauty can be. 15. Worried about street crime in the swinging 60s? Tired of dastardly villains trying to snatch your handbag? Well, some inventive minds came up with the anti-bandit bag, a purse with a very aggressive attitude. These weren't your average satchels. If a thief tried to make off with one, it would fight back. Some models would emit clouds of smoke, others would spray indelible dye, and some particularly feisty ones even had a chain that would spring out and handcuff the would-be robber to the bag itself. Imagine the scene. a surprised pickpocket suddenly tethered to a fuming, dye-spewing handbag. While the idea of a self-defending accessory is amusing, the practicalities were messy. Accidental discharges in crowded places, dyeing your own clothes, being permanently attached to your shopping. It was a bold, if slightly over-the-top, approach to personal security. 16. Oh, the eternal quest for cute facial features. In 1936, if you weren't naturally blessed with adorable dimples, you didn't have to despair. You could simply purchase the Dimple Maker. This charming device consisted of a springy metal contraption that you wore on your face. It had two small knobs or pads that pressed firmly into your cheeks, supposedly encouraging dimples to form through sheer force of will and constant pressure. Users were instructed to wear it for extended periods. The result? Probably sore cheeks, temporary indentations, and a profound sense of disappointment rather than a pair of perky dimples. It's a classic example of hope triumphing over anatomical reality, and a reminder that some beauty trends are best left in the "what were they thinking" category. One can only imagine the conversations. What's that on your face? Oh, just my cheek torture device, dimple maker? 17. War is hell, and during the World War eras, the threat of chemical warfare was terrifyingly real. How do you protect the most vulnerable, like infants, from such an unseen enemy? Well, you invent the gas mask stroller. This wasn't just a regular pram with a little extra padding. This was a fully sealed, often coffin-like carriage, complete with its own air filtration system and a viewing window that made the baby look like a tiny, bewildered astronaut on a very grim mission. Some designs were truly nightmarish, resembling something out of a post-apocalyptic horror film. While born out of a genuine and desperate need for protection, the sight of these contraptions is a chilling reminder of darker times and the extreme lengths people went to in the face of unimaginable threats. It's an invention that perfectly encapsulates fear and ingenuity in one very strange package. 18. The dream of a car that can also be a boat is an enduring one. Why choose between land and sea when you can have both? Enter the Amphar, a German creation from the 1960s that promised just that. It looked like a slightly bathtub-shaped car, and with the flick of a few levers, its wheels would sort of retract and propellers would engage, turning your daily driver into a very slow boat. The problem was, it wasn't a particularly good car on land, being prone to leaks and not very fast, and it wasn't a particularly good boat on water, being slow, cumbersome, and still, you guessed it, prone to leaks. Owners often joked it was the fastest car on the water and the fastest boat on land. It was a master of compromise in all the wrong ways, a charmingly flawed novelty that mostly just proved that trying to be two things at once often means you're not very good at either. 19. Roller skates? Fun. But what if they were faster and louder and significantly more dangerous? Early 20th century inventors, clearly fueled by an excess of daredevil spirit and a disregard for ankle integrity, decided to strap small gasoline engines directly onto roller skates. Yes, motorized roller skates. Imagine the scene. You, careening down the sidewalk with tiny sputtering engines attached to your feet, trying to maintain balance, avoid pedestrians, and not set your trousers on fire. Control was rudimentary, brakes were an afterthought, and the noise must have been appalling. It was less a convenient mode of transport and more an extreme sport for people who found regular roller skating far too tame. These contraptions were a glorious testament to humanity's relentless pursuit of strapping an engine onto literally anything that moves or doesn't. 20. Long before VR headsets became sleek and relatively commonplace, the 1960s gave us a glimpse into the future of wearable displays with the Telev. These weren't your trendy augmented reality glasses. Think more along the lines of strapping two miniature low-resolution television screens directly to your eyeballs, housed in a bulky, helmet-like contraption that probably weighed more than your actual head. The promise was a personal, immersive television experience. The reality was likely eye strain, a splitting headache, and the constant fear of walking into a wall because your peripheral vision was now a blurry memory. It was an ambitious, if clunky, step towards a more personal screen time, but it looked profoundly uncomfortable and probably made the wearer look like a low-budget cyborg with a serious TV addiction. The future was coming, but it was heavy and gave you a neckache. 21. The Cold War. A time of nuclear paranoia, bomb shelters, and radiation-proof underwear. Yes, you read that right. In an era where the threat of atomic annihilation loomed large, some enterprising, or perhaps opportunistic, companies decided to market undergarments that claimed to offer protection from harmful radiation. These weren't lead-lined codpieces, mind you. Often, they were just regular-looking briefs or panties made with some special fabric or lining that supposedly had radiation-blocking properties. Did they work? Almost certainly not in any meaningful way against an actual nuclear blast or significant fallout. It was more likely a psychological placebo, a flimsy shield of fabric against an invisible, terrifying threat. It's a rather bizarre and poignant example of how fear can fuel some truly questionable consumer products. Because when the bombs fall, your biggest concern is definitely your undies. 22. Tired of the manual labor involved in washing your own hair? So were people in the 1930s apparently, which led to the invention of the automatic hair washing machine. This wasn't a sleek salon device. This was a monstrous, helmet-like contraption that looked like it belonged in a mad scientist's laboratory. You'd sit down, this massive dome would descend over your head, and then a series of nozzles would, hopefully, dispense water, shampoo, and rinse, while perhaps some terrifying mechanical fingers massaged your scalp. Or maybe it just blasted you with high-pressure jets. The advertisements promised convenience and a thorough clean. The reality probably involved a lot of water in your ears, soap in your eyes, and a general feeling of being trapped inside a malfunctioning car wash for your head. It makes you appreciate the simple elegance of a bottle of shampoo and your own two hands. 23. The age of chivalry, when a gentleman would always tip his hat to a lady. But what if you were forgetful? Or your arms were full of, say, more failed inventions? Fear not. The self-tipping hat machine was here to save your reputation. This ingenious, if somewhat over-engineered device was a mechanism, often concealed within the hat itself or connected via a subtle string, that would automatically lift your hat for you at the appropriate moment, perhaps triggered by a nod or a small gesture. Because manually raising your own hat was clearly an unbearable burden. Imagine the potential for comedic misfires. Your hat enthusiastically greeting every lamppost or vigorously saluting a passing dog. It was an attempt to automate etiquette, which is usually a sign that etiquette itself is in trouble. A truly dapper solution for the terminally lazy or socially awkward. 24. Picture a smoke-filled party in the early to mid-20th century. The air is thick enough to cut with a knife, your eyes are watering, and you're pretty sure you just inhaled someone else's entire cigarette. But leaving the scintillating conversation is out of the question. What's a party animal to do? Why, whip out your personal portable rebreather for smoky rooms, of course. These little gadgets, often looking like a miniature gas mask or a strange metal snorkel, were designed to allow you to breathe fresh air, or at least slightly less smoky air, without actually exiting the room. You'd look utterly ridiculous, like a fish out of water desperately trying to filter the miasma. But hey, at least you wouldn't miss any juicy gossip. It was a peculiar solution to a problem that could have been solved by simply stepping outside for a moment. But where's the fun in that? 25. Sunglasses are cool. Venetian blinds are functional for windows. So naturally, someone had the brilliant idea to combine them into the Venetian blind sunglasses. Yes, imagine tiny slatted blinds, just like the ones on your windows, but miniaturized and stuck onto a pair of glasses frames. The idea was presumably to block out the sun, but the execution meant you were essentially looking at the world through a series of horizontal slits. This provided excellent protection if the sun was directly in front of you and you didn't need to see anything else, like, say, an oncoming bus or the curb you were about to trip over. Fashion forward? Debatable. Practical? Highly questionable. They offered all the style of a window treatment and all the visibility of peeking through a fence. A true triumph of form over, well, everything else. 26. For the smoker who felt that one cigarette at a time was simply too inefficient, too pedestrian, there was the chain smoking device. This wasn't just a fancy cigarette case. This was a contraption, often a modified pipe or a bizarre multi-pronged holder that allowed the user to smoke multiple cigarettes simultaneously. Because why savor one when you can inhale the fumes of 5, 10, or even a whole pack at once? Imagine someone walking down the street looking like a human chimney, puffing away on a bouquet of burning tobacco. It was the ultimate statement for the truly committed nicotine enthusiast, a monument to excess, and probably a speed run to a coughing fit of epic proportions. Health warnings clearly hadn't hit their stride yet when this bad boy was conceived. 27. The 1950s were a time of boundless optimism about atomic energy. It was going to power our cities, our homes, and naturally, our cars? Enter the Ford Nucleon, a concept car that was truly a product of its era. This wasn't a hybrid. This was a fully nuclear-powered automobile. The idea was a small, self-contained nuclear reactor located in the trunk would provide years of emissions-free driving on a single charge of uranium. What could possibly go wrong with having a miniature Chernobyl reactor a few feet behind your backside, separated by only a thin layer of hopefully very strong shielding? Parking lot fender benders would have taken on a whole new level of catastrophic potential. While it never went beyond the concept stage, thankfully, the Ford Nucleon remains a wonderfully absurd testament to atomic age exuberance and a terrifying what-if. 28. Need to haul heavy cargo over incredibly rough terrain where roads are merely a suggestion? Forget wheels, you need legs. In the 1960s, General Electric unveiled the walking truck, officially known as the cybernetic anthropomorphous machine. This four-legged, 3,000-pound behemoth looked like something straight out of Star Wars, an AT-ST walker's less glamorous cousin. The operator sat inside, controlling the legs with hand and foot movements that mimicked walking. It was an incredible feat of engineering. The problem? It was painfully slow, topping out at a blistering 5 miles per hour, incredibly complex to operate, and guzzled fuel like there was no tomorrow. While it could step over obstacles, it mostly just proved that sometimes sticking to wheels is a much simpler idea. It was a giant, lumbering, fascinating failure. 29. In the never-ending quest for better sleep, humanity has tried some truly bizarre things. Consider the anti-snoring devices of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These weren't subtle nose strips. We're talking elaborate contraptions of straps, buckles, and chin supports designed to physically clamp your jaw shut or contort your head into a position deemed snore-proof. Some looked like medieval muzzles, others like complex harnesses for a very small horse. Imagine trying to get a comfortable night's sleep while trussed up like a Thanksgiving turkey. The only thing they probably guaranteed was a stiff neck, a sore jaw, and a partner who was still awake, either from your residual grunting or from silently laughing at your ridiculous headgear. Sweet dreams were likely not included. 30. Fashion and safety. Two concepts that don't always go hand in hand, especially in the 1920s. Case in point, the inflatable life vest blouse. This was a seemingly ordinary, perhaps even stylish blouse that concealed a secret. In an emergency, say your leisurely cruise liner decides to impersonate a submarine, you could activate a mechanism and parts of the blouse would inflate, turning it into a makeshift life preserver. Imagine the scene at a fancy dinner party on a ship. Oh dear, are we sinking? Excuse me while my shoulders suddenly triple in size. While the idea of built-in safety gear is commendable, the execution was probably a bit startling and not exactly conducive to a sleek silhouette. It was a fashion statement that screamed, "I'm prepared for the worst, and I'm not afraid to look slightly ridiculous in the process." 31. Surfing is cool, but what if you live miles from the ocean? Or the waves are just like totally flat, dude? Early attempts to conquer this problem led to the artificial surf machine or early wave pools. Forget the perfectly sculpted barrels you see today. We're talking about giant concrete tubs, where machinery would desperately try to churn up something resembling a rideable wave. More often than not, these waves were either pathetic little ripples that wouldn't challenge a rubber ducky, or unpredictable, lurching surges of water that seemed more interested in violently unseating you than providing a smooth ride. Early wave technology was a chaotic, often dangerous, experiment that probably resulted in more bewildered dunkings and bruised egos than epic surf sessions. It was a noble quest for inland stoke that often ended in a wet, anticlimactic thud. 32. All right, picture this. You're at a fancy dinner party in the Victorian era, and the conversation is sparkling. But oh dear, you've dropped your fork. Bending down is so unrefined. And what if your corset is too tight? Fear not, for the reaching tongs for invalids and stout persons were here to save the day. These weren't your average kitchen tongs. These were often ornate, long-handled grabbers, sometimes spring-loaded, designed to allow one to retrieve dropped items without the undignified act of stooping. While marketed for those with limited mobility or a more substantial physique, one can only imagine the clatter and potential for knocking over wine glasses as people wielded these metallic appendages across the dining table. It was elegance achieved through remote control, a truly dignified way to avoid exercise. 33. Summer heat got you down? Feeling a bit flushed? Why not strap a miniature air conditioning unit directly to your head? The personal air conditioner hat was an attempt to bring localized climate control to your cranium. These marvels of questionable engineering often involved a bulky hat with a built-in fan, sometimes powered by batteries, sometimes even with a tiny Freon-based cooling system that probably dripped condensation down your neck. You'd look like a character from a low-budget sci-fi movie with a whirring, possibly noisy contraption perched precariously on your noggin. Did it work? Maybe a little. Did it make you look utterly outlandish? Absolutely. It was the ultimate fashion sacrifice for a slightly cooler forehead, proving that when it comes to beating the heat, some people will try literally anything. And there you have it, proof that sometimes humanity's brightest ideas are just brilliantly bad. These historical faceplants are a hilarious reminder that progress isn't always pretty. Now, the real question: if you had to use one of these disastrous inventions daily for a whole year, which one would be your personal hell and why? Drop your torture choice below. Don't forget to obliterate that like button and subscribe for more historical WTF.